Welcome everyone to Disruptive Conversations. I am so happy that you're joining us here today, where my guest is going to be Dr. Lisa Firestone. And if this is the first time that you've come on, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And please make sure to follow me to get information that will be so important and helpful for you to use every day. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. If there's someone that you know who could benefit by hearing today's Instagram Live, please contact them, let them know, and so that they can have access. I drop information all the time. And today, Dr. Lisa Firestone she's joining us from California. It's her first Instagram Live, and she's the director of the research and education at the Glendon Association. So hi, I'm fine, thanks so much. Dr. Swati Mattel, thank you so much. If everybody wants to drop where they're joining in from, that would be great. Mental health matters, indeed it does, every single day. And every month is Mental Health Matters Month. Heart and Soul Counseling, thanks so much for being here. We're waiting for Lisa to come on. And particularly at these points in time, here we go. Lisa has asked, and we're going to go live. And I see her coming on. We're just waiting. And, the tech is always its own moment of question. So I'm not quite seeing the buffering yet. So I'm hoping, here we go. It's happening. Lisa, here you are. Welcome, welcome. I'm so delighted. And so first I'm going to be introducing the show, myself and you, and then we're going right into our conversations. So welcome everyone to Disruptive Conversations with thought leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, educators, in which we deep dive into the experiences these women have needed to navigate and conquer in order to achieve the personal and professional success they have at this point in time. And I'm Dr. Risa Reiger, clinical psychologist, and I am an expert in change. I help people make positive change at any point in time. And the good news is that we're built for change. However, you can't have positive change without disruption. So you need to disrupt a thought, a feeling, a belief, a habit, a behavior in order to create your 10.0 life. And that's what this series of conversations is all about. And I'd like to introduce my extraordinary colleague and friend, Dr. Lisa Firestone, who has such a robust bio. I do need to read from it. And so Lisa is Director of Research and Education at the Glendon Association and Senior Editor at Psych Alive. She's a published author, speaker, educator, clinician, and Lisa brings her level of expertise, integrity, wisdom, soulfulness, and heartfulness into everything that she does. She's published, she was the co-author of Sex and Love and Intimate Relationships, Conquer Your Critical Inner Voice, and Creating a Life of Meaning and Compassion, The Wisdom of Psychotherapy. In addition, Lisa has been working and hard in the areas of suicide and violence prevention. We have a lot to talk about, particularly at this point in time. When we first set up this time, Lisa, we really didn't know even how much more important it would be at this point. So welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here. Everyone give Lisa a round of applause for her first Instagram Live. And thank you so much for trusting me to be here. And so the first question is there anything in your bio that I haven't described or noted that you would like to add to?
No, not really. I mean, thank you for the introduction, Lisa. I'm really glad to be here with you. And yeah, no, I mean, I am actively doing clinical work and a lot of work around attachment, having gotten into relationships and the work we do on parenting. That's been a lot of the work I've been focused on. And obviously, it applies to the other areas of suicide and violence prevention as well. So,
Yes, yes. So, Lisa, in this time of social media where everyone wakes up and then you're living your best life, it just so happened that you just woke up and there it all was. Uh, I'd like to ask you, and it's so important for our communities to hear, what is it that you feel that you needed to disrupt inside yourself in order to be able to be where you are here today?
many things. I mean, most
Okay.
particularly is the belief. I was a really shy person. I never spoke in school, um, all the way probably to graduate school. Um, but so I was very, very shy. And so the idea of doing public speaking or talking or teaching was not something I'd ever considered. I was even a bit concerned would I be too shy to talk to patients. That's, so even the clinical work I do, even though I loved the work, was a concern for me. And I had to disrupt that idea really radically to do the things that I have done and to have my life morph in the way that it has or develop in the way it has. And so that was a big disruption to my identity that had to be challenged.
Well, that's huge, particularly given where you are now. And I've known you for some time, and I did not know this about you. So
Yeah.
so this is wonderful. Now, when we take on something, it doesn't happen all at once. And so, what is it that you tap into, and what wisdom can you shed on what you tap into in order to be able to have the staying power to continue to make something happen and to make change happen?
Yeah. What do I tap into? I mean, I get a lot of energy and support from my friends and family. I come from a very big family, as you're aware, I think. Um, and so I think that's a big part of what I draw on. In fact, we recently did our first ever sibling trip. There are 12 of us. I'm the oldest. There's quite, the youngest one is just turning 21. So, yeah. But that was a group that gave me a lot of, we spent 3 days together in a cabin, and it was, that gave me a lot of energy and push towards self-confidence, actually, which was
Mhm.
important. So, yeah, I think that's the thing that keeps me fueled doing what I'm doing and where I reach for, I do think our connections with others and our people who support us really play a big role in us living our best lives, as you would say.
Yes, yes, very, 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 very much so. And so when, you're talking about doing a lot of work in the attachment area, and so help us understand a little bit about what drew you there and what aspects are of attachment is really is speaking to you and areas that you've made your personal commitment to.
Yeah, I just have a very much a passion for it. I've always been interested in how our earliest relationships shape our beliefs, sometimes in ways that are positive, but sometimes in ways that aren't so positive about how relationships go and how that then affects us and radiates out over our life. And um, it just has always seemed very important to me and looking at it in relation to the issues that I've been interested in, like suicide prevention or violence prevention, it plays a big role in those issues, those early attachment relationships and how we adapt. And I've seen the power of it to really shift people in their lives, and that also really fuels me from the work I do with couples, from the work I do with individuals, to understand those things about oneself and how they're influencing your reactions today in ways that most people are really unaware of, and so they're being influenced, but they're not necessarily understanding where any of that's coming from, and they're just often reliving their childhoods over and over again. So I got interested in that, and working with Dr. Dan Siegel, a friend and colleague of both of ours, um, you know, uh, really got inspired because he had written about attachment and how to understand and make sense of your attachment and how to really develop more earned secure attachment and inner security. He had written about it in a couple places, in a parenting book, a very older one of his, Parenting from the Inside Out, and in Brainstorm, which is about the teenage brain. But if you're not going to pick up a book about an older book about parenting or a book about the teenage brain, you weren't going to get that information. And so I got interested in asking Dan to collaborate with me and develop a course for for really addressing that. And from that, I've heard from so many people around the world who've been impacted by the course and by trying to understand their attachment and make sense of it, and just working that program that we developed together. And I've done it a lot with clients. And I guess the passion for me is that I really see it change people. And
Yeah.
I felt it myself in my own life. We did a pilot study of it before we launched the course, and just seeing, all the different people in the course be impacted by it and be a participant in that was really quite inspiring for me.
Yes, yes. And I know that, just to let people know that we had opportunities to collaborate also during the time of the pandemic. And so we talked about, parenting and parenting during the time of the pandemic, and particularly at those times that are very stressful, that what connection means to us, how we connect, how we use our knowledge to help us and for us to stay solid and centered during times that are so difficult, really can make an enormous difference about how someone navigates these difficult times and how we equip people in our lives to support equipping them with perspective, tools, resilience, and an internal wherewithal to really go
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. You were part of our expert series on PsychAlive about parenting. And, we did that during the pandemic because many experts like yourself were at home or not working as much and were available, which was really helpful. And really about important subjects that people were struggling with because, that was such a stress on all of us in our lives and
Yeah,
on our sense of connection because of the uh, isolating to be physically safe was not good for our mental health. And we are now dealing with all the repercussions of that. And, certainly for parents, it was really difficult.
enormously difficult. And so another space that's also difficult for parents, particularly since there's so much adolescent depression, anxiety, mental emotional stress, and the increase in isolation and suicidality. How did you go into uh, looking at and working with suicide prevention, which we also had an opportunity to have some collaboration with? Yes.
Absolutely. How did I end up going into it? It's sort of a number of things came together. I myself had a mentor as a young person who later, when I was all of 17, she made a serious suicide attempt. So I got very interested in the subject. She did survive, but it was a very lethal attempt. And so that got my attention. Also, when I first started doing clinical work, my very first patient had made 6 prior attempts, 3 while in the hospital.
Mhm.
So I was very resourceful about being suicidal and was feeling that bad again. So I was all of a sudden, dealing with we always get the most difficult patients at the beginning of our career. Not a
That
brilliant setup,
is,
but it
yeah.
really worked. And so, those things got my attention. And then a colleague of ours, actually, the founder of PsychAlive, a man named Frank Toby, was a political consultant. So he spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and was on a plane actually back from Washington, D.C., and ended up sitting next to then Surgeon General C. Everett Koop,
Oh,
um, who said to him, what we need is a way to predict suicide. Um, because again, he was thinking about the military suicide problem and the fact that those are individuals who the United States government is responsible for.
yes.
And that sort of launched our developing the Firestone assessment of self-destructive behavior and suicide specifically. And so really got, focused in that area and involved with the American Association of Suicidology and other groups that I've been involved with to this day. I was actually just recently at a conference sponsored by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention on suicide. So, it's a subject that I've kept learning about, and that when I started, literally, we had no empirically validated treatments for suicide.
Right.
We now have several, and we have a empirically validated way to do risk assessment and safety planning, or crisis response planning is another name for it, depending the kind of behavioral therapy people call cognitive crisis response planning. The more
Yes.
general version that was developed by the late Barbara Stanley and Greg Brown is called safety planning, but both versions have been shown to be effective.
It's so important. And one of the things that has not been part of what our parenting kind of regimen looks like is that, we tell our kids about, don't go into, don't go off with strangers. We tell them, do not drink and drive. We tell them, if you're in a situation and you're not comfortable, you just call us and no questions asked. And so we do this preemptive and preventative uh, work with our kids and have these conversations with them. But I know that what happened, and with my family, with my girls, is that we also needed to have a talk about suicide. Not, fortunately, we weren't in that. Neither of my children was in that spot, but we had heard of someone, and I just thought, um, why is it that we're not talking about this? Why is it that we're not making this like part of our, if you're feeling this way, if you're having thoughts about this, just let me know. Just let me know. And that it's so important to let someone know and not act on it. And I wonder if this is something that you've thought about or have incorporated and talk about, because it's not part of the conversation. I think that there's, um, worries that if you talk about it, you're going to plant something into somebody's mind. Like if you talk about sex, all of a sudden it will be planted in somebody's mind. So
Right, right. And we know it doesn't work that way. You can talk about sex and you can talk about gender issues and you can talk about suicide without putting the idea in somebody's mind. It doesn't work like that. And I think that's really important. And I do think there's two things. We don't want it to be in our mind, first of all. I don't think we as parents want to think that our child could do this, or a family member or somebody we care about. But the reality is they could. And in a moment of desperation and a moment of feeling like there's no way out, a moment of feeling a huge amount of psychological pain, which even our children feel at times, which as much as we would like them not to,
yeah,
we need to be able to talk about it, and we need to give them a way to talk about it. And I think that's really important because it can be a passing thing. I think of uh, a young man in my family when he was 15 and just starting to be more interested in girls. And of course, it was during the pandemic. And he reached out to ask somebody to be his Valentine, and she turned him down. And he felt suicidal. He started having those kind of thoughts, which he hadn't had previously. And he did come talk to me, which I'm really glad that he did.
yes,
And we talked about some things to do that would be helpful to him. And that was passing for him. And I'm glad that it was, and I'm glad it wasn't deeper. But, things can get triggered by things that we're not completely aware of, like breakups or what feel like romantic rejections, which are often triggers for suicide, for both young people and for adults. And the same as, and there can be disappointments or things we don't know about either, but ways people feel hurt, rejected, unwanted failure, whatever those triggers are. And we want to be talking about it, and we want them to get tools. Um, and, it can be that they're struggling with harder things. I also worked with a young person who was struggling with gender identity issues and, you know, wasn't fully discussing this with their parents, initially. Um, Now everything's kind of come around, and parents are very supportive and are being very helpful, actually. But that's
yeah.
not always what happens either, right? Unfortunately. And so, I think it's really important to have those conversations with young people and with our people and our families, and to be willing to look for it everywhere. It's our friends, our colleagues, our coworkers, our family members, whether it's our, aging parent or whether it's, a young person in our family, we should be paying attention to it. And as you said, this is even more important right now as we found out the suicide rate has gone up a lot, especially in the elderly in our country. And it's gone up for females, and it's gone up for young women and people on the LGBTQ spectrum. And, I think our society right now, the messages people are getting are not helpful. I think, it's not that things were perfect when we were growing up as young women, but things seem like they were getting better, you
Yeah.
know, and now it seems like maybe we're going backwards in terms of women's rights. And the same is definitely true, I think, for the LGBTQ community, where it felt like things were getting better slowly but surely. And now with some of these states with, bills against transgender care and so forth, it seems like we're going backwards. And I think that's a bad message to people who are struggling and trying to understand who they are. Because, you don't create these things by talking about them. You actually help people feel less stressed by them by talking about it. And with
Mhm.
suicide, you definitely take the pressure off to act on it if you can get people to both talk about it and express the strong, painful feelings that are going along with it. They get a whole lot less likely to act on it.
Absolutely. And I think also it's important to just note to the community that you can hear about this in very young children. And I'll tell you, I have done, I wish I could say I haven't, but I've done, suicide assessments on children who are like 1 hand old and who are having all different kinds of thoughts and feelings. And it's not a function of people not loving them or not being a good parent or not being caring. So, or not being able to provide for your child, but that growing up is hard. And little people have very big feelings. And these are things that need to be listened to and not dismissed in terms of like saying, well, what could be so bad? What is it that you have, what's going on that could be so terrible? And that's not where we meet people. But that also, to your point, that having this conversation well in advance, having this conversation on a preventative level, right? Because you're not going to tell your kid, just before they're going out to the party. I mean, you could reiterate, but just before they're going out to the party, by the way, if you're uncomfortable, call me, and you haven't had this conversation to begin with.
Right.
That when you plant the seeds of safety, right, that is what you will grow, and it will be part of how your children, people in your life, your people that you work with experience you, and
Mm-hmm.
what they have inside, what they're growing inside of themselves, that there is something to do, that there is a way to connect with someone, that this isn't the only solution because you've already put it in place.
Right. And connection is the whole thing. Because, really, if you look at suicide, it's when connectedness is less than the amount of pain. And the more
Mhm.
connected you are, the more protective it is. So, yeah, letting your kids know that you're always going to be there for them, that you can hear this. And when they do try to talk to you, to really draw them out rather than try to tell them why they shouldn't feel that way, like you're saying, because, yeah, from your perspective, obviously their life looks pretty good. But from their perspective, it might not in that moment. And not because it isn't, but because, when somebody's in a suicidal mode, there's kind of, there's blinders on. They're not seeing all these other options out there, and they're not understanding that people may feel a lot more connected to them than they feel connected to, than how they're feeling at the moment, and so it's really important to try to get their perspective, you know, that one person you don't even know too well, their rejection means more than all the love you have in your life, but that it may be how the child is seeing it. And I too have seen children as young as age 5. One little boy in particular who was walking in front of cars, and his pediatrician told his mother he needs therapy,
Yes.
which I really appreciate. And but he was carrying a lot of internal anxiety that he had, but also a lot of secrets in the family that he knew, and it was leading him to feel quite self-destructive and helping him get more connected with his siblings and with his, parents and get those secrets out really shifted things in the family and was really important. Um, but it was, yes, even very young kids. And you could dismiss it or say, well, he just was unaware or, you know, being spaced out or something. No, he was walking in front of cars on purpose.
Yeah. And so there's also in communicating and not communicating that oftentimes if something is not talked about, right? We're not talking about over talking or just staying stuck in a space, but when something isn't talked about, often the because our brain wants to understand, our brain wants to make connections and get to answers and figure things out. So oftentimes when our brain is like going, well, something isn't being talked about, then the next question is, well, maybe it's not supposed to be talked about. Right. So we put that in as the answer because then we're answering about, well, I shouldn't talk about this. So when we do talk about something, when we're able to talk about and bring up the tough topics and the things that are uncomfortable and the things that nobody really, you know, wants to talk about, but when you make that a possibility, then you're also messaging that it's okay to tell me and talk about it. And so even if someone says, look, I want to talk about this is what's happening, but I kind of don't want to talk to you about it, that's okay too. You just help them, you move them along. And
Mm-hmm.
that just the act of mentioning, talking, bringing something up lets people know that it's talkable.
Absolutely. And that's important. And that's, I think what you said is important too about, if your child doesn't want to talk to you about it, that's fine. Let's find somebody they do feel comfortable with and they do trust and they do connect with in that way. And you're right. When we don't talk about things, they become taboo. And that's really not helpful to people because things, talked about, it's such a relief. And when we keep everything to ourselves, whatever it is, it's really difficult
Yeah.
and it doesn't go well. And being alone with it in our own mind is not always a friendly place.
No, especially, well, that would be a conversation for another time of what our inner critics look like. So, Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
I know the time goes by in a blink. So, let me ask you this, Dr. Lisa Firestone, what is your next disruption?
My desk disruption. um, I think again, it just comes down to breaking down set ideas about things, or beliefs that I may have had, trying to decide, exactly where my life goes from here in terms of work. Still working, obviously, and seeing patients, but traveling more and more and trying to really make the choices to do the things that really matter to me as on the front burner. And I think partly existential issues have been very much in the forefront of my mind, partly since my dad is 93, and I also have a friend recently who's more of a peer who just went through a very difficult cancer treatment
Mm,
and appears to have come out the other side of it. But, it's early days. And so, that really just brought to mind that there's no time like the present. And it's really important to do the things that really matter to you and give them the full importance that they really have to you instead of putting them off for a day, when we have time for that. And it's just not worth doing that.
so, I'm going to take that, I'm going to just pull out for a second and just say for everyone listening to realize that today is your day. Today is your day. And so, as we're here and we're talking together, and whether you're hearing us live right now or you have the opportunity to hear it on recording on our sites, and this will be on Cycle Live. So, if you've missed it, you haven't missed it. Uh, that what is it that you're going to commit to today that you're going to take action? One thing, small, doable, that's important and meaningful to you, and with the emphasis on also doable. So make that commitment to yourself. Tell someone, let somebody else know what you're committing to. That'll also help to make it more real. And today's your day Don't let it go. Hold it in your hands. Do something, whatever it is, whether it's making a cup of tea for yourself, reaching out to someone that you haven't spoken with, send somebody a text, take yourself for a walk, have a dear colleague and friend to speak with, as I'm speaking with Dr. Lisa Firestone today. Whatever that is, find it for you and make sure to give it to yourself, because absolutely you are worthwhile doing that for.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yes. So Lisa, we're gonna take our cover shot now.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready? Do you need a little
Yeah.
little hair moment, a little hair moment?
Never mind.
Here we are. Okay, here we go. And one more. And thank you so very much for coming on and being and giving this wisdom, important information to the communities out there. And I want to let everybody know that come join next week on Disruptive Conversations. Remember that positive change can happen at any point in time, and I've saved a seat for you. See you next time.